Class and ID. On page 122, and I'll tell you, 122 is a hell of a dense page here. We have this one throwaway page on something that is tremendously important to the way it is that you will build web pages, not just now, but forever. And it's the small structural difference between a class and an ID. Now, as you're developing here in Chapter 4, you're really starting to notice how much more style you can apply to an element simply by adding more style to it, right? And what a class and an ID allow you to do is to break from just what is built into HTML and CSS and create your own rules for how you want, an element to behave. So a class and an ID, we're actually going to have a whole video that follows this, a walkthrough here in brackets. But in the meantime, a class and an ID allow you to define something. And whatever that something is, it's because you've determined, that's the word I'm looking for, you have determined that this is something that I'm going to repeat potentially over the course of my web page, and I want it to behave in a certain way. So what might that mean? That might mean that every time we have a mention of Rock Valley College, I want, like we mentioned in the previous video, I want a certain font weight, font size, font family on there. So I'm going to call it RVC. So I can actually go through and in my CSS, I can declare a class or an ID called RVC. And in that declaration, I can say this is the font weight, this is the font family, this is the font face, all of those different things. Now, here's where it gets a little sticky. The text does not do a particularly fantastic job, I don't think, of describing the difference between the two, a class and an ID. So I'm going to tell you here. An ID is something unique, right? So each one of you has a student ID. And that is what we use to identify you from every other student here at Rock Valley College. But you're all enrolled in the same class. So that means I can reuse that class again and again and again and again to describe, something on your transcript, for example. So you will all be in 2 H020 WEB101, but you will still each maintain your own unique ID, right? Your student ID. So what we're saying is a class can be used time and time and time again on a web page. So the RVC example I gave you before is a good idea to use for a class, right? Because I might mention Rock Valley College numerous times on a web page. An ID can be used one and only one time on each web page. So think about things like your header, your banner up at the very top. Do you want that banner to be repeated again and again and again on a web page? No, you do not. That's going to lead to really gross looking design. So I would make banner an ID because I only want that to be used one time. But aside from that, functionally, a class and an ID are the same. So this is where people feel a little confused or conflicted as to how to use, which one of the two of these do I use, a class or an ID? And what I'm going to tell you is that's up to you. If you want to maintain a rigorous set of rules on a page, because you are probably not going to be the only developer who ever writes on this web page, right? You're going to be part of a team of developers who develop on this web page. If you want to create a rule, a rigorous structure that has to be followed, you would say this is an ID. It can be used one and only one time on a web page. If you try to use it more than once, it simply never displays. Or do you want to not enforce a rule? Do you want everything that you declare to be a class? So that way it's up to the developer to follow kind of an implied contract of, hey, look, use the banner one and only one time, but it's a class. You can use it as many times as you would like. That's really up to you. What I will tell you is, in the examples that we use, I make everything a class just so that if you use our code base elsewhere, it's easier for you to copy and paste that in to your own projects. And yes, I think that that's a valid use of your time, is to reuse code. But I will tell you that when I was managing a web design shop, or when I would create web pages for either my own businesses or other businesses, I was absolutely of the mind that, hey, look, certain elements should not be repeated. So banners, for example, or, major banner, minor banner, things of that nature, those are IDs. I don't want 50 of those on a page because that's going to look terrible later on. So I would enforce those as a rule. So remember, ID can be used one and only one time per web page, numerous times over a website, but only one and one time on a web page. A class can be used as often as you would like on a web page and as often as you would like over a web site. So those are the differences you'll see there.